SCP-001 Pickman-Blank Proposal. Containment Class Aegis. Disruption Class Eki. Risk Class Notice. SCP-001 is a memetic complex known internally as the Frontispiece. Residing in the human collective consciousness, it exerts an anomalous force upon all initialisms, containing the Latin letter sequence SCP. Without anti-meme 001 inoculation, considerable memetic conditioning, or thaumaturgic ontokinetic capabilities, no human being encountering such initialisms is capable of mentally connecting them, or whatever objects, personages, or organizations they are applied to, with the SCP Foundation. The Frontispiece therefore allows the Foundation to operate public-facing front organizations which are simultaneously identifiable at a glance to agents in the field and veiled from hostile operatives or the general populace. For example, all Snooze and Cruise Palace franchise locations also operate as Foundation safe houses, while Sawyer's Cheesy Pretzels eateries act as intelligence gathering hubs and launching points for mobile task force operations. SCP-001-1 is the Sigil, a non-linguistic visual trigger mimicking the SCP-001 effect. See Addendum 001-3. Anti-meme 001 is a thaumaturgically produced inoculant for SCP-001, supplied to all Foundation personnel on a regular schedule. The Frontispiece possesses a singular fault, which to date remains unexplained by anomalous science. There is a non-zero chance that it will entirely fail to operate on individuals who frequently encounter anomalous phenomena or who were exposed to it during their youth. Such individuals inevitably come to recognize the connection between Foundation front organizations and eventually the Foundation itself. This most commonly occurs with agents belonging to groups of interest, hostile or not. It has been hypothesized that exposure to a presently unquantified element common to all anomalous phenomena carries an inoculant effect, similar to that of anti-meme 001. SCP-001 was intentionally created and implemented by the Foundation in 1969 at the height of the Panopticon crisis. Addendum 001-1 Panopticon Crisis Overview. In the 1960s, the SCP Foundation drew the ire of multiple national governments when it was discovered that Overwatch Command was simultaneously aiding and hindering all major players in the Cold War. Canada was among the first to withdraw support in 1964 after the actions of resulted in the violent death of Royal Canadian Mounted Police Sergeant Raynard Watts, chair of the Occult and Supernatural Activity Task Force. Israel and Lebanon mutually agreed to cut ties to the Foundation following the disastrous outcome of 1965's Operation Eighth Trumpet. In 1967, Egypt and several other North African states withdrew support after it was discovered that the stranding of the so-called Yellow Fleet in the Suez Canal was caused in part by the Foundation due to an anomaly in transport above the SCPS Conrad, breaching containment. The most devastating withdrawals came from the United States of America and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. While providing material and personnel to the U.S. government during the Vietnam War, the Foundation was simultaneously working with communist regimes to secure both funding and a sustainable D-class personnel population. When President Lyndon B. Johnson was informed of Overwatch involvement in the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1964, he terminated all financial, tactical, and personnel arrangements, only allowing the Foundation to continue operations on U.S. soil after United Nations resolution backed by the Global Occult Coalition. The USSR was alerted to Foundation involvement in the development of the Enigmagraph and its extensive use in Western espionage operations. The Foundation was ousted from many Soviet territories, only maintaining scattered sites outside Western Germany. This left the Foundation's sole strongholds in Japan, South America, Latin America, and the Bahamas. even though the relationship with Cuba had to be bolstered with donations of early-stage cloning technology to assist with Fidel Castro's failing health and need for organ donations. Each of the incidents described above was exacerbated by the intervention of a hostile agent identified as Person of Interest 001. Profile: Person of Interest 001. Name: unknown. Occupation: operative. Various. Primary alias: Elizabeth Crocker. Elizabeth Crocker joined the United States Central Intelligence Agency in 1959, brought on as part of MKI SOLDA, and rising through the ranks until becoming personal assistant to Director John Alexander McCone. Shortly after joining the CIA, Crocker developed a romantic relationship with Dr. Alexander Hilbert, a CIA researcher responsible for the development of the quantum brace, an experimental Egan weapon capable of altering probability. Hilbert was killed in 1964 during a test of the quantum brace, shortly after the Foundation attempted to recruit him. Crocker incorrectly believed the test was sabotaged by the Foundation following Hilbert's refusal of said offer, and subsequently leaked Overwatch's involvement in the Cuban Missile Crisis to President Johnson. Crocker is a Class 3 Magus thaumaturge with training in cryptomancy, a branch of thaumaturgy dealing with anomalous symbology, language, and codes. Her training predates her recruitment into the CIA, though her exact date of birth and therefore the timeline of her training is unknown. On October 19, 1967, Crocker disguised herself as 057's personal driver and proceeded to shoot her over 12 times before leaving her body in front of a Foundation safe house in San Francisco. A note was attached to the corpse. Do you know the secret to democracy? Here's the most common wrong answer. One man can make a difference. That's not democracy at all. Of course, it's autarky. One man making all the difference is no different from, say, 13 men doing it. Oh, the violence that misconception lets people like you perpetrate. It conditions us to tyranny in the name of the greater good, as defined by the lesser evil of tyrants. You want us all marching to your master plan, and you don't care who has to get tread underfoot on the way. No, the real secret to democracy is that no two people want to make the same difference, and when they see how different their friends and neighbors and colleagues already are, it makes them so goddamn hopping mad. Nobody likes to confront the fact of someone else's reality. Nobody wants to toil towards someone else's utopia, and everybody loves to play the blame game. They got a lot of grievances to lay blame for right now, and as luck would have it, they've already got a ready-made scapegoat sitting right under their noses. It's high time somebody broke up your tidy little racket. No, more than one somebody. Everybody. We're going to contain you, and you're going to suffocate. The assassination of 057 created a vacancy in the 05 Council that could not easily be filled, more often than not leaving Overwatch deadlocked on major decisions. This marked the beginning of what archives and revision personnel have subsequently termed the Panopticon Crisis, due to the constant scrutiny from the world governments precipitated by Person of Interest 001. With the Foundation hemorrhaging resources and the increasing difficulty in operating in a clandestine manner, it was feared that an LV-1 burning veil scenario would ensue, culminating in an LV-0 broken masquerade scenario. On November 23, 1967, Overwatch Command issued a radio transmission to all surviving Foundation sites, ordering their personnel to attempt amelioration of this situation by any means at their disposal. Site-01 subsequently enacted complete radio silence as Agent Crocker and a team of anomalocryptographers were then finalizing the process of deciphering the Foundation's most secure communications ciphers. The situation at Site-43 is best explained by the following report, prepared for the Canadian Prime Minister by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Occult and Supernatural Activity Task Force. On January 3, 1968, the Prime Minister revoked the provisional authority of the Secure, Contain, Protect Foundation to operate a subterranean research facility beneath military camp Ipperwash, known internally as Site-43. Department of Defense forces attempted to enter the site without effect. On January 7, 1968, therefore, 2 OSAT teams were dispatched. Teams McDonald and Steele entered Ipperwash Provincial Park without incident, but expected heavy resistance when attempting to enter the camp itself. Similar attempts on previous occasions had been thwarted by mythological figures belonging to the nearby Indian reserves, which typically ignore the soldiers stationed at Ipperwash. This experience was not repeated, however, though a number of supernatural beings residing in the woods and beneath Lake Huron observed the advancing teams. They made no effort to interfere. Team Steele's Grade 1 clairvoyant was able to read the Foundation operatives within the structure, housing the site's sole service elevator. Taking advantage of a shift change, Team McDonald successfully entered and disabled the guards within. Under interrogation, these guards revealed the construction of a subterranean rail network reaching to Grand Bend, Ontario, as well as rumors of tunnels beneath the bedrock. Team Steele is presently engaged in sounding Ipperwash Park to determine the precise location of either feature. The elevator has so far resisted attempts to summon it or to breach its shaft, but with the camp under OSAT control, it is only a matter of time before the Foundation is forced to face their eviction. Sergeant Gordon Shine, Chief Superintendent, OSAT. Without elevator or subway access, Site-43's topside operations were restricted to only those assets already located beyond the interdiction zone and capable of radio communication. Chief of Security and Containment, Martin Strauss, and Site-01 liaison, Dr. Edwin Falkirk, briefed these agents and researchers daily. Chief Strauss briefed Dr. Okori on the particulars of Person of Interest 382, including information which would not be incorporated into the SCP database until the late 1990s, regarding Dr. Scout's unsanctioned collusion with said individual. Dr. Falkirk was not cleared for the full extent of this information. The present-day iteration of Person of Interest 382's profile is appended below. Profile: Person of Interest 382. Name: Thelo Zwist. Occupation: mimeticist at large. Known aliases: Ivor Braun, Dr. Bromide, Tolliver Brumley, Will Deaver, Mr. Gloss, Joseph Hino, Dr. Jim, Angela Mercy, Reiki Rick, Alexander Schofield, Uncle Teddy, Hammond Washburn, etc. Thelo Zwist was apprenticed into a now extinct ancient society of highly advanced cryptomancers known as the Schriftsteller, the Writers, a society of which he is now the only known surviving member. Zwist is believed to be the most proficient cryptomancer presently active on the Earth. Zwist is functionally immortal and has proven capable of producing anomalous effects on a global scale. In youth, he altered the Germanic language family to incorporate a deadly disease trigger, accidentally. and a decade after the Panopticon crisis ended, he insinuated a non-existent political personage into the historical record. The latter act was at the behest of the SCP Foundation, with whom he is nominally aligned. Site-43 director Dr. V.L. Scout spent many decades ostensibly pursuing Zwist, but the two were in fact engaged in a covert collaboration to advance the aims of societal survival and stability, though they would never meet in person. The primary reason for this collaboration was the resurgence of GOI 5054, the Gift Schreiber, the Poison Writers, first in the form of a right-wing Canadian think tank called the Writing History Institute. For unclear reasons, the Gift Schreiber have engaged in periodic attacks on societal stability worldwide. Their archaic activities are primarily attested in the Western world, but archives and revision research has uncovered Gift Schreiber activity in over 140 nations worldwide. Their attacks are invariably mimetic in nature, though the form varies. Many Gift Schreiber utilize the written word, while some use images and others employ audio. Zwist himself has proven capable of using all aforementioned media, though his primary area of expertise is written mimetics. His command of this skill is such that he is essentially impossible to detain, and he has gone unmolested by the Foundation since the early 1980s. Armed with the 1968 equivalent of this information, Chief Strauss advanced a theory via a Foundation thaumatologist in Cuba. Dr. Scout had planted a reference to the Gift Schreiber in Dr. Okori's mind to suggest that person of interest 382 be contacted about crafting a cryptomantic solution to the Panopticon crisis. This would later be proven correct. The thaumatologist in question had been Dr. Euler. As Dr. Falkirk was not cleared for this information, Chief Strauss and Dr. Okori planned their response in private. Two of Site-43's mobile task forces regularly attempted pursuit of Zwist for training purposes only, and a raid on his last known place of business had in fact been in the late stages of planning when the DND and OSAT occupation made egress impossible. Without MTF support, Dr. Okori would attempt to make contact with the Cryptomancer on March 12, 1968. One week after this meeting, Zwist presented Dr. Okori with an anomalous logo design for the non-existent Scout's cargo packing and the chemical formula for an inoculant, later developed into anti-meme 001. As Zwist's dealings with Dr. Scout were at this time unknown to the Foundation at large, Dr. Okori claimed to have captured these items during his supposed raid. A quorum of the site's directors Executive Committee of the Hold rejected the use of this untested thaumaturgy, but in light of the Foundation's vastly reduced budget and the absence of safer solutions, they were overruled by the O5 Council. The logo was printed on moving vans under Zwist's covert direction, and the Foundation's first Panopticon Crisis-era front company was commissioned. Its cover as a courier service allowed for the transport of personnel and materials across North America without interference from various world governments, allowing for the limited reestablishment of supply lines between various sites across the continental United States, Canada, Mexico, and Central America. OSAT was ejected from Camp Ipperwash, and Dr. Scout was able to return to Site-43. Dr. Euler became a consultant for Scout's cargo packing, as he was very eager to examine Zwist's work and attempt to decipher it. With the crisis by no means over, extending this cryptomantic umbrella over the entirety of the Foundation was designated an Alpha-1 priority. That project, therefore, became by default SCP-001. Addendum 001-2, Creation of the Frontispiece. In May of 1968, a collision along Route 66 in the central United States rendered an instance of Zwist's work unusable. He had stressed to Dr. Okori that the products of his writing were dangerous if damaged, and Dr. Okori therefore personally supervised the achromatic abatement of such instances whenever accidents occurred. This particular instance and its handlers, Dr. Euler among them, were stopped at the Canadian border by enemy agents. The destruction of all non-functioning instances was halted in order to subject them to more rigorous investigation. Dr. Euler formed the Mimesis and Cryptomancy Research Group with achromatic abatement specialists Dr. Okori and Dr. Ilse Reynolds. As the latter suffered from a condition which did not permit her to leave a sealed chamber at Site 43, communicating only through its single window, O5 Command reassigned Dr. Euler to that facility. It was quickly determined that, contrary to Zwist's warnings, example of his writing did not become universally fatal when damaged. Their cognitocatalytic qualities instead took on new, although admittedly mostly undesirable, attributes. Dr. Euler began breaking down each damaged instance via thaumaturgy, with the ultimate aim of producing further examples for more varied purposes. Dr. Reynolds designed microscopy equipment capable of examining the decomposed cryptomancy at the atomic level, while Dr. Okori researched remote reading and the collective unconscious in order to better understand how Zwist's powers acted so effectively on human communication. Meanwhile, what remained of the Foundation's facilities in the Soviet Union was slowly being destroyed. The GRU psychotronics division's inexperience with or outright apathy towards Foundation containment methods resulted in over 70 anomalies breaching within Soviet territories during the 1960s. This culminated in June of 1968 with the Soviets raiding an isolated, abandoned biological containment site near Lake Baikal, unleashing an anomalous mutagenic virus resulting in This is widely considered one of the most disastrous events of the Panopticon crisis, and it resulted in Leonid Brezhnev issuing the order to surrender all remaining Foundation facilities. Threatened with overwhelming force, Overwatch reluctantly agreed. A hurried evacuation commenced. A shipping container labeled with the insignia of a former Foundation front company was discovered by operatives embedded in the port of Los Angeles on July 2, 1968, containing a badly beaten but still alive Site-03 director, Abrsha Sokolsky. The following note was printed to his necktie. Can you feel the noose yet? Unbeknownst to the Soviets, Site-120 in Częstochowa, Poland, remained operational. Personnel had evacuated into the extra-dimensional free port of Esterberg, accessible via a way within Site-120 10 days prior to Soviet occupation. In the process, they removed all documentation and took with them whatever anomalies were feasible to contain within a pocket dimension. Brezhnev's orders, whichever would have resulted in the deaths of dozens of biological and/or sapient anomalies, if not for the actions of Anna Wojcik, a Site-120 thaumaturge. Wojcik was able to curry favor with the Kapuza Basiliskia, a Polish sect of the Serpent's Hand whose views ran counter to Soviet interests. The Kapuza mobilized Allied cells across the USSR to care for the isolated anomalies and maintain containment where necessary. While inevitably many items were still lost, Europe and Asia were spared an undoubtedly cataclysmic mass containment failure due to the efforts of the Kapuza and Wojcik. This uncharacteristic cooperation is credited as a major reason for the warmer relations between the Foundation and the anomalous community in Eastern Europe today as compared with the rest of the world. It was a scientific breakthrough in late July of 1968, however, which was to permanently alter the course of the Panopticon crisis. Dr. Reynolds theorized that this apparent accident of grammar had aided the construction of Zwist's cryptomancy. It might allow for far more comprehensive applications once the field of study was better understood. If the Scouts' cargo packing emblem did in fact rely on the SCP acronym, then the Foundation would not necessarily need to create many new fronts to alleviate its international pressure. The thaumaturgic processes functioning within the existing sign could, in theory, be transferred to another without completely understanding the means by which Zwist had set them in motion. The site director's executive committee of the whole recommended that work on this stopgap measure be matched with a parallel program of research into the actual origins of Zwist's cryptomancy. The following day, after a mass containment breach occurred at Area 97 due to poorly maintained facilities, the O5 Council again overrode their concerns. Though the practice had fallen out of favor in the post-war period, many early front organizations had already employed the SCP acronym in their titles for purposes of deniability. Site 43 itself had immediate access to two of these, Lake Huron Supply, Control and Purification, and the Simpson Center for Policy. As these fronts still had public-facing functions, however, Dr. Scout would not release them for thaumaturgic experimentation until the working theory was proven correct. In August, the Foundation lost contact with Regional Command in South Africa. Agent Crocker had infiltrated Site 52 in Johannesburg some years prior under the alias Dr. Gabriel Fish. In that time, had been inciting distrust between black and white personnel throughout the region. This culminated in Regional Director Rupert Jansen issuing an ultimatum on 16th of August 1968 that all non-white personnel be removed from the country immediately or else face execution. This is only possible due to the fact that Dr. Anje Verholten, the previous regional commander, had been de facto removed from her position by way of being stranded with her family in the central United States by the 1967 Radio Silence Order. Crocker's manipulations led to the loss of over 200 members Foundation personnel, along with the last site south of the Congo. The only active facility in Africa until the end of the Panopticon crisis would be Site 27 in Tanzania, presumably overlooked due to its isolated location and low-risk anomalies contained within. Crocker executed Jansen, then proceeded to give the Fausch administration access to anomalies they would use to attempt to silence the anti-apartheid movement gaining traction throughout the nation. Johnson's freeze-dried but thawing corpse was discovered by a routine patrol of the Site 19 interdiction zone. Following these developments, a note in his jacket pocket: "You're running out of continents." On September 3, 1968, Doctors Euler and Okori successfully isolated a series of stable, unidentified anomalous particles in the abatement residue from a Scout's cargo packing instance. Dr. Reynolds' monitoring equipment had been so precisely tuned that the research group believed they should be capable of reapplying these particles to a new logo, potentially recreating the effect with a different front organization. On September 15, 1968, Dr. Euler broke down a fresh, undamaged instance of SCP-001 and, with Dr. Okori's assistance, transferred the anomalous particles to signage for the Shell Construction Partnership. Class D personnel exposed to the new instance experienced disorientation and a lack of recognition of their surroundings. While the effect was nowhere near as strong as with the Scouts' cargo packing emblem, the results were nevertheless extremely promising. It was assumed, as would later be proven correct, that Swiss performed additional thaumaturgy during the application of his art, which could not be replicated without his aid. The company was put into full operation and began managing the legal and material processes for the creation of new fronts utilizing the SCP initialism. After acquiring numerous subcontractors and setting up separate offices in 5 major North American cities, the Shell Construction Partnership came under legal threat by the Royal Dutch Shell Petroleum Conglomerate. It is believed that Agent Crocker was responsible for alerting them to the front's existence. Shell asserted that the new company was guilty of serious copyright infringement. However, they proved unable to successfully execute their lawsuit due to persistent confusion, demotivation, and even amnesia on the part of their legal counsel, particularly in preliminary hearings with the partnership's own counsel. The hastily empowered fictional law firm of Sloan, Corbin, and Paiva, providing the ultimate proof that the research group's program of study was a promising one. Dr. Euler began studying the composition and behavior of the anomalous particles in earnest, and while Dr. Reinders conducted research into linguistic and paralinguistic theory, Dr. Corey was further able to occlude the activities of the Simpson Center for Policy and Lake Huron Supply, Control, and Purification, but no further progress on this front was made in 1968. Swiss had determined that enemy action could not possibly be responsible for damaging the quantity of his writing Dr. Corey had asked him to replace. Surmising that the Foundation was now attempting to reverse engineer his work, he therefore cut off all contact. The site director's executive council, the whole, strenuously objected to this project on the basis of its potential to injure the combined cognition of mankind. The research group acknowledged this point in private correspondence with Site-01. The 05 Council's response was to suspend all meetings of the Executive Council until the conclusion of the Panopticon crisis, at which point they would be free again to air their concerns. Crocker's campaign against the Foundation continued. In early February, whilst the Foundation was attempting to negotiate a new treaty with the People's Republic of China, she used cryptomancy to instill a sense of severe paranoia in Chairman Mao Zedong, who had made the unusual decision to attend the talks in person. Mao specifically believed that the proxy for 0510, Dr. Amity Noble, was wearing recording equipment broadcasting to Western intelligence gathering bases. The talks rapidly deteriorated until Mao ordered the People's Liberation Army to forcibly eject the Foundation representatives. While Dr. Noble was able to escape unharmed, this left the Foundation without any foothold in China until after the end of the Cold War. Dr. Noble discovered a note in her personal effects upon arriving safely at Site-01. 5 minutes to midnight. Crocker went on to infiltrate Site-95 for a period of 2 months. She alerted President Nixon to its existence, and Nixon ordered the U.S. Army to storm and occupy the facility for the sake of national security. It is believed that U.S. Gov intended to use Site-95 to falsify photographic evidence in the event that the Apollo program proved fruitless. Ultimately, Apollos 9 through 12, 14 through 17, and 19 were all successful in their missions to the moon, with Apollo 13 famously suffering a mechanical error in Apollo 18. Rendering the occupation moot. Site-95 would only be ceded back to the Foundation in November of 2001. As the urgency of the Frontispiece project mounted, Drs. Euler, Okori, and Reinders began confronting the reality of what they were about to do. It became apparent that the only direct contact with and alteration of the human collective consciousness would be able to affect the changes required to make the Frontispiece operative. Having intensively studied the budding field of noetics via the works of chemist Vladimir Vernadsky and philosopher Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, Dr. Okori declared the experiment technically possible. troubled by the moral implications and desiring to commit their reasoning to posterity. However, each doctor typed a single note to be opened only when the full history of this event might finally be written. The brutality of Crocker's methods continued to increase. She began killing Foundation personnel indiscriminately, using cryptomantic runes to induce targeted cardiac arrests or aneurysms. The runes would then dissipate before causing collateral damage. In May of 1969, Crocker used one of the first known instances of an auditory cryptomantic agent embedded in a recording of the Beatles' I Want to Hold Your Hand to kill 10 members of Foundation personnel meeting in a safe house in Edinburgh, Scotland. While ignorant of the Foundation's reverse engineering of the frontispiece, Zwist had supplied a series of single-use counteragents to Crocker's cryptomantic assaults. These typically took the form of text and/or imagery which appeared at first glance to be non-anomalous and could easily be concealed until needed. These were now pressed into service, and demand very quickly outpaced supply. The research group was now producing linguanons in vast quantities, including a very small supply of orthons. The Shell Construction Partnership oversaw and underwrote the creation of 19 functioning front companies, primarily those which could be made financially self-sustaining. The Foundation's overall program of SCP research was reduced by nearly 40% to support the startup costs. While these organizations were not fully immune for persecution, as they would be when the larger work was complete, their cryptomancy and powdered logos were sufficiently disorienting to enemy agents to supply a field advantage to Foundation operatives worldwide. This chain of events came to a head when Crocker, leading a squadron of OSAT agents, commandeered a Foundation vehicle and used it to infiltrate Site-43 on July 4th, 1969. A note was discovered in the topside elevator subsequent to these events. It's not whether you win or lose. The singer of the apparently anomalous song which removed Crocker's cryptomantic glamour was identified as famous folk musician Woodrow Wilson Woody Guthrie. Agent Crocker disappeared from Site-43 after her defeat by Zwist and remained at large. The Occult and Supernatural Activity Task Force began an intensive procedural review to determine how she was able to infiltrate their ranks so effortlessly, issued a warrant for her capture, and withdrew from Camp Ipperwash after issuing an official apology to the Foundation. Notably absent was any admission of wrongdoing on their part. No further interference with the Frontispiece program was experienced, and Drs. Euler and Okory prepared to implement it at Site-01, with Dr. Reinders participating remotely via radio, by special dispensation from the O5 Council on July 9, 1969. Though both Drs. Euler and Okory were severely drained by the process, the frontispiece was successfully applied. Within 2 weeks of its obfuscatory effects could be observed worldwide, as fronts which had formerly offered only limited protection now thoroughly frustrated enemy agents and offered obvious succor to Foundation operatives. It was found that continuing to apply linguanons to each sign produced an amplified effect. The practice therefore continued, as did research into more sophisticated applications. The creation of new organizations took place at a feverish pace. The Foundation reestablished its revenue streams and was able to fully resume normal functions in the Western Wall by June of 1970. By 1971, revenue had reached the point where 10 new high-cost containment sites could be built each year. Governmental relations were essentially reset during this period. Each outgoing administration carried their anami towards the Foundation with them, and the frontispiece prevented the new arrivals from acquiring the leverage their predecessors had enjoyed. The Panopticon crisis was essentially over. Addendum 001-3 Panopticon Crisis Aftermath. In August of 1971, an incident in the German Democratic Republic exposed a crucial vulnerability in the frontispiece. Despite Dr. Scout's objections, Dr. Euler was able to successfully commission Person of Interest 922 to create an imagery-based version of SCP-001 compatible with all known languages, SCP-001-1. This action inadvertently brought Person of Interest 922's attention to his own innate cryptomancy, of which he had previously been ignorant. Following his death in 1987, members of Person of Interest 922's workshop would form the artistic terrorist group Are We Cool Yet?, using his cryptomantic art as the basis for their own interventions. In 1975, O5 Command ordered a sweeping overhaul of Foundation nomenclature, standardizing the Sectana object class system, and discontinuing terms such as thaumatology, deific, and Egan weapon. While several of these decisions have been revised or reversed in the intervening years, the terms quantum, linguaphysics, and cryptomancy remain discontinued, as does the imagomancy performed by Person of Interest 922. All three of these terms are now jointly covered by the blanket term mimetic. Elizabeth Crocker eventually resurfaced in Canada, having founded a think tank known as the Writing History Institute under the assumed identity of conservative political scientist Ophelia Writing. The Writing Institute had been working with a gift Schreiber front in order to disrupt the 1979 Canadian federal election. A team of thaumaturges under the direction of Dr. Corey raided the Writing Institute and drove out the gift Schreiber in late 1979, though no prisoners were taken, and Crocker again escaped custody. On January 1st, 1980, Dr. Okari was found dead in his family home, apparently murdered by an unknown assailant. 3 weeks later, it was discovered that he used thaumaturgy to capture audio of the events leading up to his death and imprint them on an EP vinyl record, originally containing the Marvin Gaye album What's Going On. In light of these revelations, the reconvened site directors, Executive Council of the Whole, recommended that all memetics products be immediately terminated and the SCP Foundation's name be reverted to its original form. The O5 Council dismissed these demands, citing the invaluable protection conferred by the Frontispiece and the need to prepare for the worldwide escalation of memetics prophesied by Crocker and attested by the formation of Are We Cool Yet? Crocker herself remained active throughout the 1980s, passing on her knowledge of cryptomancy in the USA and Canada, in particular falling in with members of the phone phreaking community. She may have been involved in the 1980 ARPANET crash, as signs of cryptomancy proliferated through it, and then the CSNet, and finally the Internet. As she had predicted, President Reagan proved less susceptible to SCP-001 than Presidents Nixon, Ford, and Carter, to the point where he promised to expose the Foundation in February of 1981. The attempt on his life on March 30th provided the Foundation an opportunity to expose him to mimetic reinforcements while he received treatment at George Washington University Hospital. How Crocker knew of Reagan's Alzheimer's disease over a decade before his official diagnosis remains unknown. It is believed that Crocker is deceased as of 2021, barring access to anomalous life extension means. She would now be over 100 years old. Fragmentary evidence suggests that an individual fitting her rough description was involved in the re-election of President George W. Bush in 2004. However, and the name Ophelia Writing appears on a roster of campaign staff. Lisbeth Geshenk, another likely alias, is on a list of financial donors. For nearly 4 decades, Dr. Euler refused, on practical grounds, to consider further alterations to the noosphere. The O5 Council also approached Dr. Reinders, who claimed to have exhausted her insights into the field of memetics. Dr. Euler declared the research group defunct and was transferred to Site 87 in 1984. He and Dr. Ryan Melbourne collaborated on several more immediately practical projects, including the Mimetic Resistance Index, Cognitive Resistance Value Index, and the Euler-Melbourne Mimetic Resistance Test, all designed to combat the effects of cryptomantic proliferation. When he was again pressured to resume large-scale experimentation in 2007, Dr. Euler traveled to Site-01 and demanded a formal injunction. You want me to make you a Swiss Army knife, a tool for every occasion, and that's fine. In fact, it's far better than fine. I agree with it. But if you want me to help you bring an end to occasions, set the human race to a rigid schedule, take the uncertainty out of life beyond what's needed to keep life worth living. No. I agree with the gift schreiber on one thing and one thing only. The value of free will. I was free to make my choice, and so was Dr. Okori, and I believe I remain so free today. You, of course, are freer still. I've advised you fairly and honestly in the past. So when I tell you what we should be doing with our freedom, please at least consider it. We should be protecting the people of this earth as we have claimed to already be doing, even to the point of protecting them from ourselves. We should not exert our will simply for the sake of doing so. Should I seem to be moralizing from the moral low ground, please understand. That's where I got my perspective. I have helped you to remove one small situational freedom from the world, and it's helping me to see the value of what remains. If we're going to steal people's memories, dismantle their livelihoods, and alter their very perception, and thanks to the arms race, we ourselves set in motion, we absolutely must do these things. We need to do it directly. Not through proxies, not through connivance, not in the mode of the gift schreiber. If we must be inhuman, we need to experience it at a human scale. Nothing less can keep us honest. When we meddle with their matter from a distance, safely insulated from the reality of what we do, we are not scientists. We are not saviors. We are ideologues without the courage of our own convictions. I doubt I can make you another Frontispiece without Ilse and Izzy anyway, and I know for a fact there's not another man or woman alive who can match us at what we did together. Well, that's not entirely true. There is one. No doubt he's watching. Dr. Euler's injunction was granted, though the work he carried out before and since represents the foundation of modern mimetics. All experiments conducted subsequent to the Frontispiece, including the Berryman-Langford Project and the Lillehammer Cognitohazard Register, continue to operate on individual cognition. Periodic votes are, however, held by the O5 Council to overturn Dr. Euler's objections to wide-range noetic tampering. As of this writing, the objections stand by a narrow margin. A slim majority of the Council believes that the inadvertent and inconvenient spread of mimetics knowledge is directly attributable to the Frontispiece Project, as Crocker suggested in 1980, and that repeating this experience could prove unwise. 5 decades of continuous experimentation has improved the individual mimetic effects of all new mimetic signage before taking into account the blanket coverage of the frontispiece effect, though older instances are therefore less efficient. Subjecting them to achromatic recycling is now a low priority due to the relative ease of modern liguanon production. All SCP-001 media still retain the singular flaw, allowing individuals familiar with the anomalous to see through their effects. While occasionally useful in the event, the Foundation must coordinate with organizations such as OSAT, the Global Occult Coalition, the FBI's Unusual Incidents Unit, the British Occult Service, or Poland's ZM Witch Slayer Division. This is more often than not a detriment to efficient clandestine operations. Many theories have been advanced to explain this curious defect, and the discovery of a note from Theodor Zwist and Dr. Euler's effects after his death in 2013 has provided fertile ground for further speculation. It has been dated to 1980, the year of Dr. Okori's murder. Arik, I don't know if you saw me at the funeral, but I was there. You and your fallen friend have borne the weight of your deeds most admirably. These past few years, though, I would not have done the things you did. I can understand your reasons. To a certain extent, I myself have acted more rashly on such sympathetic impulses, though not for a few centuries. You alone now carry the responsibility. You must ensure that what you did can never again be done. Ensure that it was worth doing in the first place, and most of all, ensure that you, only you, can do it again, should the worst come to pass. You must also remember how seductive a quick and dirty solution can be, and show your successors where the pitfalls lie. It is not enough that your apprentices succeed you, they must also excel you. The Foundation protects the world. You sometimes like to imagine you do it alone, reciting comfortable, meaningless aphorisms to cover a great deal of violence, cupidity, ruthlessness, and cruelty. You will forgive me if I hope you do not find your burdens light. And you don't, do you? Is the frontispiece that perfect creation you imagined it would be, as your equations and diagrams assure you it must, in fact, be, or does the wind keep brushing beneath it, exposing you to the surrounding climate? Again, you will forgive me if I consider this outcome ideal. You will never be completely safe. You will never, ever be able to act with total impunity. You will need to keep cultivating allies, cutting deals and making friends, ones you have not only protected but genuinely supported and loved, who will support and love you back. If you did not have to do these things, I fear that you would not, because you, like me, are only human. When you are gone, I suppose your responsibilities will fall to me. I played my part in this little drama after all and played it well. Too well. You probably think you pulled quite the fast one on me, breaking down all those van panels and poking around in the particles, but your magic umbrella was only borrowed, not mastered or even properly understood. I know nothing of baking bread, I admit, but I am an expert parasol matcher. My handiwork cannot be bent or broken unless I wish it. Was it a nasty little trick to play? Perhaps. But you need to stop falling for such simple deceits. The world cannot long afford your naivety. In future, when you wield a tool, be certain that you fully understand it. Finally, a warning. I do not remember the anger I felt all those long years ago, the grief I poured into the words which poisoned 1,000 minds. I am still dealing with the fallout, but that great and awful blast, I cannot feel it anymore. Time wears away such things. If you forget why your consciousness is balked at the critical hour, Eric, if you begin to lose sight of what separated you from Elizabeth Crocker, or start to become the monster she accused you of being, if you begin to see the world as a chessboard and all its people pawns, and grant yourselves the right to fuel extravagant strategies with their lives. But no, you won't. Of course you won't. You won't need this warning at all, because your course was set the moment I baked that lovely little flaw into the writing which you stole. I robbed you of the opportunity to become the tyrants of all our nightmares. You will have no choice but to be better than that, because evil only flourishes in ease. You will never know ease. You and those who come after you will need to keep doing the work. You will get to decide how well you do it, of course. And on that matter, I have a suggestion. Do it right. Stop compromising principles. Philo. And B. Ideas are flame, and flames burn until the fuel is spent. You have opened the writing to mankind. You have made kindling of us all. Look to your fire breaks. Special Containment Procedures. The maintenance of SCP-001 is paramount to the continued existence of the SCP Foundation and the veil of secrecy. Research into sustaining, extending, and strengthening its mimetic properties is an Alpha-1 priority at all times. Individuals found resistant to SCP-001 are to be amnesticized, detained, or terminated where appropriate and or necessary. All SCP Foundation personnel rated above C class must undergo anti-meme 001 inoculation.